All right, Nuggets fans, welcome in to Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at BETONLINE, number 38. I am your host, Ryan Blackburn at NBA Blackburn on Twitter, part of the Mile High Sports Podcast Network, and I'm excited to talk about Russell Westbrook today. A little bit of a different recording time, so sorry if you miss it on the live, but if you can, it'd be awesome if you could like and subscribe to the video. If you come back around to it, we'd greatly appreciate it. Would also greatly appreciate ratings and reviews on the audio side of things. So if you're listening over there, first of all, thank you so much for being a consistent audio listener. Been doing this for a long time. This is my 697th podcast episode on Pickaxe and Roll. For those of you that know me before, I was Nuggets Numbers and the Denver Stiffs show and figuring out even what the hell to do before that. But really excited, as always, to bring you great Nuggets content. And now it will be the focus on Russell Westbrook, a newcomer into the Denver Nuggets rotation. Should be a lot of fun, or maybe it won't be. I'm curious to see what your guys' opinions on Russell Westbrook are. Make sure to let me know down in the comments below if you think that Russell Westbrook will be a fit for the Denver Nuggets this year. Really quick, this podcast, as you know, is brought to you by our good friends over at BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Hey, get in on their $200,000 MegaContest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of the $200K. When the game's over, head on over to their online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker. Head to their website today to get in on the action. BetOnline, the game starts here. Again, thank you so much for tuning into the show. Let's stop. Actually, let's do this first. What's up, Dehan? Thank you for hopping in with me today. Russell Westbrook versus Reggie Jackson is a no-brainer. It should not even be a discussion. And, I think that is a good place to start on this thing. I'm about to show some pretty poor playoff numbers for Russ. I'm about to discuss him through the lens of okay, Dehan, my mistake, my friend. I am very curious as to what the perspective for most folks is on Russell Westbrook. Is he the former starter, the former star? Is he a sixth man? Is he somebody else? Is he a different player at this stage of his career that the Nuggets could surely use, could surely be excited to have in their rotation, and somebody that can bring some things to the table that I will discuss in this podcast? But I also think it's important to understand the central question on this one. Can Russell Westbrook fit in by standing out? That is my central question here, because so much of Russell Westbrook's game throughout his entire career has been let Russ be Russ, has been always going to the cup, unapologetically being himself, making sure to be aggressive, never letting anybody off the hook. He's a dominant personality, a great teammate. But in his after prime years, he's been a difficult fit for a lot of these teams, whether it's the Clippers or the Lakers or the Houston Rockets. Washington, he was fine. He was pretty solid there. But for the most part, I think folks are assuming that Russ is going to be who he was at those previous stops. And I'm just not sure whether that's the case. I'm not sure whether he is going to be closer to Bruce Brown, whether he's going to be closer to Reggie Jackson, whether he's going to be closer to somebody else that we have plenty of stuff to talk about for sure with him. First and foremost, for any Russell Westbrook fans that are popping in, I haven't been the biggest fan of his game over the course of his career. That does not mean that he's not a good player, that he isn't a clear first ballot Hall of Famer. He should absolutely be that guy. There's no question about that at this stage of his career. This is about how he fits into the larger collective for a team that also won a championship, that has already won a championship with their current core. How does Russ impact that? What can he bring? I do think the Nuggets have to make significant change, not significant, but reasonable tweaks to how they were last year, and perhaps Russell Westbrook can help with that. But it is important to understand that Russ is supposed to fit in. Russ is supposed to be part of the larger whole for this group. And I think he knows that. I think he understands that at this stage. I hope that everybody that's sort of around him, the Russell Westbrook kind of stan accounts, I hope that they understand that he can be a massively impactful piece for the Nuggets while not being the center of attention for much of his time. So I am very curious to see what it looks like. He's not a super adaptable player or hasn't proven to be that throughout his career. And when a team is allowed to scheme for you in a playoff context, when they are allowed to like take their time, understand what their best matchups are for different situations, when they specifically look to game plan for you, Russ is definitely, I think, a little bit more like game planable for other teams. And I think the reality of that is this last playoff run where things just did not go his way. Obviously, Kawhi Leonard, not the same player, ultimately missed some games, but he like was just not good enough. Russell Westbrook was not good enough. He shot 26% from the field versus Dallas. And he was one of the reasons why they lost. And that just is an unfortunate thing for a situation where I thought it actually looked really good early on for the Clippers. Didn't ultimately end that way, but initially it was pretty good. Here's what it looks like for Russ. I put together his playoff shooting stats. This is a small sample size. Let me be clear. This is a small sample size against a team that was specifically meant to wall off the rim, that did a really good job against Russell Westbrook and had the personnel to sort of manage it. But you consistently see this kind of defense when it comes to Russ. You can't see the guy in the corner, but there's a guy in the corner. But the fact that you can't see the defender, I think, is really important in this picture that's on the screen currently. Luka Doncic is sagging way off of Russ. He's about to take a runway right at him, doesn't make the layup. And the numbers that I've put in the top right of that graphic, 13 of 50 from the field. From 0 to 3 feet, he shot 8 of 15, so 53%. That was fine. Like that's okay in this case if you're able to bring some value to other spots. But the unfortunate reality here is that outside of the restricted area, Russell Westbrook in these last playoffs shot 5 of 35, 14% from the field, and he shot 4 of 17 from 3. The key there is, of course, the non-restricted area two-point shooting, where he shot 1 of 18 from the field in that series. And that is just unacceptable. That can't happen. On NBA.com, it said that he was 1 of 14 from the field when being guarded directly by Maxi Kleber, who was one of the main players that came off the bench for Dallas last year in that series and made sure to match up with Russell Westbrook. He was able to sag off. He was able to provide size. He was strong enough that he could kind of meet him at the rim, and he never really gave up the restricted area. And that was the entire game plan, and it really hurt Russ, and by extension, hurt the Clippers. Dallas fans were also yelling, "Shoot," when he had the ball in scoring position. And that is never a great sign for somebody. So I say all of this not because I'm trying to pile on, but just I want to give Nuggets fans the picture and understand what happened at the end of last season for the Clippers. Could Russ have been better? Yeah. And I actually watched every single possession, every single shot miss that he had in that series. And I'm going to say, like, there are some things that he can clean up. There are some things that he can be better at, and I think would be better at with the Nuggets. But there's also some things where he's not attacking correctly. He's not putting himself into the best position to succeed. And that is something where he's got to clean up himself. And like that, hopefully Nikola Jokic, Michael Malone, Jamal Murray, anybody that's leading the Nuggets can help him understand and help him be better at. But like, this is just what it's going to look like from a defensive standpoint. And I think it is important that people not forget that. Now, that is not the only thing that Russell Westbrook did during this last year. He was pretty solid in some other categories. He had some other important traits that he can bring to the table: downhill driving, playmaking, physicality, and some switchability. His defense, while not great, is still better than Reggie Jackson. And it's that physicality and the size that he brings that allows him to be more impactful on the glass, that allows him to do some other things. He's also just a dog. And I made mention of this in a podcast where I was discussing what Denver should be looking to add in free agency. And I mentioned the dog factor. I mentioned the lack of dog that Denver had last year without Bruce Brown. And it was very noticeable. Denver was very unsure. They were very tentative, didn't necessarily drive, didn't necessarily have the attitude that they needed to bring. And Russell Westbrook, for whatever you want to think about him, he brings a lot of dog to the table. He brings a lot of attitude, just almost feels affronted when you insult him with the way that you're guarding him. He'll do the baby thing. Like, he'll absolutely do all of that. And I think the Nuggets need some of that. They need to be confident in themselves. And I think that he can bring some of that for the young guys. Now, you got to have the right dose of it. You can't do it overly too much, because then people just think you're being fake. But Russell Westbrook's not a fake player. He is a real as hell player. And that is just whatever you believe in that. Like, he's going to give you authenticity. There's no doubt about that. He gets involved. He stays involved. He doesn't float. That's something that the Nuggets have had a problem with some of their guards, with some of their forwards. And he will absolutely stay involved. He's not going to take himself out of the play just because things aren't going his way. He's going to try to be successful over and over again. And there is some credit to that for sure. Now, the way that the Mavericks were guarding him in the playoffs, you need shooting around him. You need players around him that can space the floor, that if he's going to get that pathway to the rim, you're going to want shooters out there to really space things. And I think that there are some lineups that Denver can put out there that help with that. They aren't necessarily perfect, but they can certainly help. I think you got to take AG off the floor in that starting lineup, and then you could play Russ. You can almost play Russ in the dunker spot in some of those situations, and he could be out there, he could be available. But then when you get into transition, he could push the pace a little bit, push the tempo. That's something that Russ is still going to be good at least if he could stay relatively efficient. Jamal Murray, Julian Strawther, Michael Porter, Russell Westbrook, Nikola Jokic, sure. That could absolutely work. Murray, Christian Brown, Michael Porter, Dario Saric, and Russell Westbrook, that could work too. It's not going to be ideal. I think that it's going to be very interesting. I didn't include Peyton Watson in any of those. I didn't include Aaron Gordon in any of those. If the Nuggets are going to have another big man out there, sometimes it's going to be difficult to play Russell Westbrook and a power forward, or somebody that shoots like a power forward. And that could be a problem. That could absolutely be an issue for Denver. But defensively, there are some ways that they could put some lineups out there that work. Christian Brown, playing him next to Russell Westbrook, that would be very physical. That would be some good attitude. Peyton Watson will be out there in some of those situations too. You play Jokic, you play Murray. Like, you can absolutely play both of those guys next to those three, and you could come up with some good defensive lineups. Aaron Gordon obviously will factor into that too. And so there's a lot to like in that regard. But one thing that I want to make clear, actually, you know what? Let's take a break. When we come back, I am going to emphasize that the comparison should not be between Russell Westbrook and who he was before. It should be, can Russell Westbrook be a better player and a better fit than Reggie Jackson? That is where the conversation should be. We'll talk about that on the other side when we come back on Pickaxe and Roll. But first, I want to tell you about number 38, who did a great job in hosting last night's watch party for Mile High Sports and covering the CU game. Shout out to the CU Buffs, by the way, that was an interesting game. That was a lot of fun to watch. Travis Hunter's incredible. Shador Sanders is incredible. Those guys are going to be certainly first round picks. Hopefully, if you're a CU fan, top 5 picks. But it should be a very interesting season for the Buffs. And if you want to watch it anywhere, you should definitely watch it at number 38. They will take care of you. You've got indoor, outdoor seating, plenty of food options, plenty of drink options, lots of great variety. You've got a patio area. You've got a large screen. You've got some multiple screens inside and outside. It's a great place to be for the fall. Make sure to go check it out, number 38 in Rhino, and let them know that you came from Mile High Sports. We'll be right back on Pickaxe and Roll. All right, I'm back. Second segment. Ryan Blackburn here. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Would really, really appreciate it. Okay. I think that so much of the conversation, a lot of the conversation is controlled by Lakers fans nationally, but the national discourse around the Nuggets is very, very tough. I think people think that they didn't replace KCP, and they kind of didn't. They really replaced KCP internally with Christian Brown, but as I've talked about with Christian Brown, with Peyton Watson, there are reasons to believe that those guys can step up and fill some of the gap. Julian Strawther as well, somebody that didn't play much of last year when it actually mattered. But then they talk about Russell Westbrook being the KCP replacement, and that's just not true. That's not what's going to happen here. Russell Westbrook is going to replace Reggie Jackson, and Reggie Jackson was good in the October, November, and December months, but after that, January, February, March, April, May, he was not very good. I'm going to put this back up on the screen. Here's a comparison on the season from last year between Reggie Jackson and Russell Westbrook. The only reason I highlighted those was to show who was leading in different categories. There's no doubt who the more efficient player is between Russell Westbrook and Reggie Jackson. But they played basically the same amount of minutes, and you're getting more production from Russ. He's getting more involved. He's going to be more physical. He's going to be somebody that does more things. And then on the defensive end, you can see some of the impact metrics with that. The stocks combined, Russell Westbrook is doubling up Reggie Jackson in the stocks. And the EPM, the net ratings, things like that, I think those are important. And one of the things I include in net rating with and without top players is because with Russell Westbrook, I consider the top player with the Clippers, Kawhi Leonard. And some of the, I think they are a little bit more built to be a team without their top player than the Nuggets are specifically. You're probably going to see Russell Westbrook look a lot more like Reggie Jackson in that net rating than like he is now. But I think that there's at least a possibility that the Russell Westbrook minutes, if you build a solid lineup around him off that bench unit without Jokic, that could fit a little bit better. I think Dario Saric makes a lot of sense there. I think Peyton Watson getting up and down the floor makes a lot of sense there. Julian Strawther, same thing. And then you stagger one of MPJ or Jamal Murray, and you're feeling okay, you've got the makings of a good lineup. The EPM number is also a big deal. I mentioned this, I will mention this later in the podcast, but the defensive EPM gap is significant between those two. So if you're looking for something between those two guys, what you should feel confident about for Russell Westbrook providing to the Nuggets, is that Denver's defense, when he's out there, should be better. And part of that, Reggie Jackson barely averaged any rebounds. He was Denver got killed on the offensive glass when he was out there. Russell Westbrook, for all of his warts, he's been one of the best rebounding guards in the entire NBA, and frankly, NBA history, based off of what he provides. And are the Nuggets going to get out of his way so that he can have rebounds? No, but he's going to get himself involved. He's going to be a little bit more physical. He's not going to stand around and do nothing. And that is what you're hoping for. You want somebody to be hard-nosed, to actually provide some say in the outcome in a lot of these possessions. All right. I think So here's another thing. I didn't have this on the actual graphics, but Reggie Jackson averaged fewer than 10 minutes per game in the playoffs. For as horrible as Russ was in the playoffs, Reggie Jackson averaged half the minutes, 33% from the field, 32% from three, 3.5 points, 1.3 rebounds, 1.0 assists. Both of their PERs, Russell Westbrook and Reggie Jackson, were each 5.1 and 5.2 respectively. They both sucked. Like what Denver is actually asking for Reggie or for Russell Westbrook in this moment is to be better than that. And I think that point last year with him against the Dallas Mavericks with the Clippers was just a very low point in his career. And I think he can be better than that. I think he can bounce back for it. I think the Nuggets have a better situation for him than some other teams have. And certainly, difference between Jokic lifting guys up and James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, who's not even Kawhi Leonard at that point, Paul George. The difference between those guys lifting you up and Jokic lifting you up is just so different. And I can't emphasize that enough. For as critical as many will be, and that this obviously has a possibility of blowing up in Denver's face, I think that there's some more upside here than people are understanding if Russ is willing to buy in, if Russ is willing to do the right things. Let's get to some questions here. I asked for some questions on Russell Westbrook coming from some folks over on Twitter. Hi says, and he had a handle that I won't pronounce on here. He asks, do you think Russell Westbrook will be able to function in the playoffs? One thing we saw Dallas do was put Kleba on Russ and essentially play free safety when others had the ball. I think that is going to be a defining factor, and it might be a defining flaw for Russ. And it's one of those things that I think that the Nuggets are going to have to evaluate. They may not be able to use Russell Westbrook in the playoffs that much, just like they didn't use Reggie Jackson that much. They might have to find some other options, which is why it is so important for Peyton Watson to get up to speed, for Julian Strawther to get up to speed, for Dario Saric to stay involved and to be good, as opposed to what he was at the end of the season for the Warriors last year. I think that there is a world where Russell Westbrook is actually the 8th or 9th man for the Nuggets in the playoffs, and maybe he provides a similar role, like kind of that 8 to 12 minutes per game that Reggie Jackson provided. And if that's the case, then look, he's a minimum contract. You weren't expecting a crazy contribution. I think anybody that is expecting Russell Westbrook to stay super involved into a playoff atmosphere and be a 20 to 25 minute per game player in the playoffs, somebody that is truly integral, I don't think that's what's going to happen. Now, look, I didn't think that Reggie Jackson was going to be as integral as he was last year. And then Michael Malone played him a ton, but he also cut his minutes down in the playoffs when other guys proved to be better fits. Jamal Murray and Russell Westbrook playing together, that's going to be interesting. Can those guys play together? Maybe a little bit more than Jamal Murray and Reggie Jackson, but that is another pivot point for what his minutes are going to look like, because Jamal Murray's got to be on the floor. I don't know if Russell Westbrook has to be. Certainly Reggie Jackson did not have to be. Is that the difference? CT asks, what lineups are tenable to play Russ and Murray together in the backcourt so that Murray can play more off ball? It's a great question, and it's a very important one, not just for the regular season, but for the playoffs as well. Can Denver build good lineups with those two together? Because you wanted multiple ball handlers. That's one thing that Denver didn't have in the playoffs this last year, was they didn't have the flexibility to be able to play multiple ball handlers at the same time. So can you build lineups that make sense? I think that any lineup with Jokic can be good enough. Russ plus Murray plus Jokic, that'll be fine. You could play any duo basically of Christian Brown, Peyton Watson, Michael Porter, Aaron Gordon, and play any two of those guys next to Russ, Murray, and Jokic, and you'll probably be fine. You might even be able to get away with Julian Strawther, although you get a little small in that regard. So going to be interesting to see whether that can actually fit. Now, if you don't have Jokic out there, Saric has to be one of the guys that's out there. And then I also think you probably need Aaron Gordon for defense next to Saric. That is something that I would factor in. I'd probably play Murray and Gordon together and play Russ and Saric together. Then that's 4 of the 5, and you play a versatile wing. The problem that Denver's going to run into, I think, is their wings are one way. Christian Brown right now is a one-way wing. He's not a two-way wing. Julian Strawther, same thing, but the other way. He's an offensive wing, not a defensive wing. Michael Porter, probably a little bit too big, although when you get to the playoffs, that's what it's probably going to be. Russ, Murray, MPJ, Aaron Gordon, Dario Saric. Playing MPJ and Saric together, you'll get the spacing that you need, but that is a pretty weak defensive duo. And so that could be pretty tough. I'd be a little bit concerned about that. Really, if you're looking to play Murray and Russell Westbrook together, you have to have a wing that is versatile enough. I think they're missing Justin Holiday, if I'm being honest. Like, I would try to put Justin Holiday next to those two guys, somebody that can play a 3-and-D role. Maybe Denver can add that in the regular season in like a midseason trade for somebody, but that's something that I would look at. Like, can Julian Strawther be good enough on the offensive end to make it work? Could Christian Brown be good enough on the defensive end? What about Peyton Watson? Is there enough spacing between Russ, Peyton Watson, and Aaron Gordon to actually make that work? That's that's tenuous, I'll say. So I think that there's something there. And finally, at least in this one, we'll do another segment after this. Asher Levy asks, shout out Asher, how do you think the Nuggets should leverage Russell Westbrook's playmaking? How much do you think he improves the transition offense? I think that he'll be better than Reggie at the transition offense, that's for sure. I think it's important to get going. And it's one of the things that I really hope with Peyton Watson, that when you play Russell Westbrook and Peyton Watson together, that those two should get out and transition a ton. Christian Brown will also get out and transition a ton. So no questions about that. The problem is that, like, you're looking for an efficient finisher. Like, Denver needs to get out there more. Like, there's no doubt about that. So Russell Westbrook will certainly provide that. But the problem for Denver in transition this last year was that they were inexplicably inefficient in a regular season context. I don't think that Russell Westbrook helps the efficiency. Now, getting more volume is important, but he's going to have to finish at a high level. And I don't know if that's what he's going to do. I think that Peyton Watson will be improved as a finisher. I see Noah was talking about Peyton Watson's finishing at the rim. I think that that's something just going from your second year to your third year, really your first year, second year of playing, that you'll be kind of fixing some things at that point. But I do agree with you that that's a weakness in Peyton Watson's game. It's also a weakness in Christian Brown's game. So hopefully he can improve upon that as well. But Murray getting out in transition, taking some easier shots, MPJ getting transition threes, those would be very important. I think that Russell Westbrook will help with that. I don't know. We'll just have to see. Let's take another break. When we come back, we are going to do a couple more questions, and then I've got some more takes on lineup stuff and just where I think Russell Westbrook is at this point in his career. We'll be right back on Pickaxe and Roll. Final segment, Pickaxe and Roll. Ryan Blackburn here. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. Let's wrap this thing up by talking about what we're expecting from Russell Westbrook in the 2024-25 season. I have spoken previously about Peyton Watson. I think that he should be the sixth man of the team. I think it's important for him to be featured in that regard. And I honestly think, now this is not to demean Russell Westbrook at all, but he is in his 17th season. He is a player that the Nuggets should not be centering things around for the present and future of their team. I think that it is very important for them to get Peyton Watson going, for them to consistently play him every single night, at least 20 minutes a game if they could manage it. Sometimes that won't happen. Sometimes there will be situations where it doesn't happen. And like sometimes it's going to make sense to play Russell Westbrook more. But at this point, my hope would be for Denver to play Russell Westbrook about 20 minutes a night on average. When Jamal Murray sits, and he will, like he'll probably play 60 to 70 games, depending on how he's feeling, depending on how healthy he is throughout the year. In those games, Russell Westbrook should absolutely start. I have no qualms with that. If I'm Denver, I would try to get him some reps with Jokic, some reps with Porter, see what the spacing is like with him and Christian Brown and Aaron Gordon at the same time, things like that. But when Christian Brown sits, I wouldn't want to start Murray and Russell Westbrook. I would want to start Peyton Watson or Julian Strawther in that case, try to get some of the young guys out there more consistently because they need those players to be ready consistently for a playoff run. And I just don't know if they are at this stage. Peyton Watson proved to not be in this last year. Julian Strawther did not play. I think that both of those guys can play going forward, but it involves Michael Malone making that conscious decision to involve them early and often. Couple more questions to answer. Cannon asks, what non-starter are you most excited for Russ to play with, and why do you think we'll see some unique pairings with Russ? I personally think that for as bad of shooting as Russell Westbrook generally is, he's about a 27% three-point shooter over the course of his Clippers run. I think that pairing him with Julian Strawther is going to be important. I think that both of those guys can really, really help each other. Russ, get out in transition, set some guys up, find some easy shots for your best young shooter. That would be a great thing. I honestly think that if Jamal and Christian Brown are going to be your primary starting duo, primary backup duo can be Russell Westbrook and Julian Strawther. And I'd feel really good about that if I was the Nuggets. I think that there should be times where you try to feed Julian Strawther as much as possible if you're Russ. And I think that Russ's defense should help out Julian Strawther in some of those situations too. I think you could make a case for a lot of different guys on that second unit. I think you could make a case for Peyton Watson. You could make a case for Dario Saric. I don't think you could make a case for Zeke Naji, but I think that Julian Strawther is just the one consistently that I would say, hey, veteran point guard, somebody who can get you the ball consistently, somebody who takes attention away from you so that you can get free. That would be my goal if I was Russell Westbrook. I would try to set up Julian Strawther as much as possible. Brendan asks, will he be a plus defender for the bench unit? I know he'll be better than Reggie on that end, but would love to hear some numbers to back it up. Okay, here's some numbers. Reggie Jackson's defensive estimated plus minus last year, EPM, was minus 1.4. It was in the 21st percentile. Not a great look, but also kind of understandable for where Reggie Jackson is in his career. Russell Westbrook, on the other hand, plus 1.1 defensive EPM. That is in the 85th percentile among players at his position, which is great. That is a really, really positive number. Part of it is because he's being surrounded by other positive defenders, but so is Reggie Jackson. He was being surrounded by Christian Brown, Peyton Watson, Aaron Gordon, KCP, other guys that could really impact the game in a positive way. And so Reggie didn't really impact things that well. Russell Westbrook, I think, can really provide some solid defense. And then some other things. I know the playoffs were mostly a disaster from the offensive perspective for Russ. Just going back and looking through the matchup data, I haven't done the full deep dive on where the scheme breakdowns are, things like that. NBA.com has him guarding Luka and Kyrie, a combined 8 of 19 from the field, 1 of 5 from 3, 4 from the free throw line, allowed 7 assists, forced 5 turnovers, all while being guarded by Russell Westbrook in that time. So, if you're shooting about 42% from the field and 20% from 3 against Russ, it seems pretty reasonable. It seems pretty solid. There's other things that, you get cross-matched. He didn't necessarily perform as well in some of those situations, but he's, I think, 6'3", 6'4". He's a physical player. When you force him to guard, up a position a couple times, switch out onto some forwards, he's not going to back down. Reggie Jackson, I think, had some moments where he did pretty well, but overall was just not like he couldn't really contest Karl Anthony Towns. And Russell Westbrook probably can't either, but I think that there's at least a slightly larger chance that he can do that. So, in closing, are the Nuggets better positioned for Russ to fit in by standing out than last year's Clippers or last year's Nuggets? I think that Russ Jokic pick and rolls will be pretty good. Like, it's infinitely better than Russ and Zubats or Plumlee or Daniel Tice. Dario Saric and Russell Westbrook should be better from a pick and pop standpoint. Saric had a great shooting season. If he could continue that playing next to Russ and Russ can set him up relatively consistently, that would be a good thing for Denver. And I think that you could just, like, one thing that we've really seen from Denver over the course of these last few bench seasons is that there's no real go-to set without Monte Morris out there anymore, without some other guys consistently setting the table. Can I interest you in a Russell Westbrook, Dario Saric pick and pop? Could that be the consistent go-to play for Denver when the shot clock kind of starts winding down? If Russ can get all the way to the rim, then great, you've got a shot at the rim. It's probably not going to be an efficient shot because Russell Westbrook's not super efficient. He might turn the ball over. He might get blocked. But it's probably just as good as what Reggie Jackson was providing. There's another stat that I missed, by the way, when discussing Russ versus Reggie. One of the weaknesses that people discuss with Russell Westbrook is his pull-up shooting. In the playoffs, he was horrible at it. I don't want to share those numbers. Those were ghastly. Regular season, he was not great. 40.8 EFG percentage on 114 attempts in 66 games. So, like, not a ton of volume there. And when he did shoot them, often they were late in the shot clock. He would do the bank shot on the left side or the right side of the paint, maybe pulling up from 2, or he'd pull up from 3. Not a ton of pull-up threes, but he did a reasonable number. Reggie Jackson, so the number for Russ was 40.8% effective field goal percentage. Reggie Jackson was at 41.3 on his EFG percentage on 265 attempts, so 150 more. It's not like Reggie was much better from that perspective. It's just not. And I think it's important for people to understand that and appreciate that when they're discussing Russell Westbrook and what he's going to do for Denver. The alternative was not good, especially with the bench unit. Reggie Jackson was not able to help Denver's bench unit much at all. And I think that there is at least a chance that Russell Westbrook can provide enough attention grabbing away from some of the younger guys that they can also shine, that they can also do stuff. His efficiency is not going to be awesome, but it is going to be like a good enough level of impact that I think that he can be solid. And that's all you're asking for. I think that you should be asking for him to be the 6th or 7th man in the regular season and the 8th or 9th man in the playoffs. The goal for this year should be to get Peyton Watson ready to go, to get Julian Strawther ready to go, to get Dario Saric ready to go and get involved. And maybe he's just a big man that you can throw into the loop that you didn't have before. And that would benefit the Nuggets greatly. I don't know what's ultimately going to happen with Russ. I think he's going to be a spot starter for Murray. I think he's going to bring energy and playmaking. And his goal should be to try to elevate those two young guys. Whether he actually does that, whether he's okay with sort of taking a little bit of a step off the gas, being more of a veteran, probably not in the DeAndre Jordan route, but I think DeAndre could help him. I think that there's a world where he takes his foot off the gas just a little bit and tries to be more of a vet as opposed to a rotation piece. Now, Denver doesn't have too much flexibility with their guards. They need him to play, but they need him to be smart. They need him to be impactful. And I think he can do that. But it's going to take something. It's going to take some faith. And I think it's going to take some shifting from Russ as well in order to make it happen. Okay. Folks, that is going to do it for this episode of Pickaxe and Roll. I really appreciate everybody Appreciate all the love and support on the show. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button on all of our content. We've got so many great things on the channel right now. We've got our reactions to the CU stuff. We've got some reactions to the Broncos season kicking off. There's a lot of stuff to get to. Make sure to go check it all out. Subscribe to the MHS YouTube channel. Thank you so much, everybody. I will be back next week.